Welcome to Maximize Your True Potential, Strategies for Success, hosted by Ken Kingstead. Part 5, Non-Confrontational Selling Through Rapport Technologies. This series will give you the edge to recognize and then achieve your goals through its philosophy of constant, never-ending improvement. Strategies that will become a fluid part of who you are. Maximize Your True Potential, Strategies for Success. Your first step to success, beyond your imagination.
Welcome back. This next session is a real passion for me. I call it rapport technology. What is rapport technology? Well, last time we spoke, we talked about pacing and leading. We understand that communication is a huge part of our ability to get our message across and get people influenced to our way of thinking. Okay, but what is rapport specifically? Rapport is this. Rapport is the ability to develop trust and understanding in a relationship. Think about it once. Think about your very best friend, someone that you get along with the best, someone you know in your whole life. Is there a lot of similarities or is there a lot of differences between the two of you? I would challenge you that you've got a lot of similarities. Now think about somebody, when you even think about them, you get kind of irritated. You don't like them, you never did like them. Why is that? Are there a lot of differences that are being perceived between the two of you? I would say yes. So again, going back to our communication with our customers, are there people that maybe they see us, or they walk up to us, how we talk to them, maybe they feel a certain way based on our tone of voice, the way we carry ourselves, God forbid, the way we're dressed, you know what I'm saying? And you know what? If there's more differences perceived, the less rapport is usually achieved. The more similarities that are perceived, the more rapport is usually achieved. So our goal as a salesperson is to not give anybody the choice not to like us. Think about it once. For years, we've rolled the dice and we've hoped that we had a common ground with everyone we met. And you know what? 20% closing ratio on fresh walk-in traffic. Why is it so low? Part of the reason is that I think that rapport has a lot to do with it. Obviously, maybe we only hook up with naturally with 1 out of 3 or 4 people. Is that possible? Yeah. If we could have a rapport with everyone, that it wasn't even a choice for you as a customer, that you had no choice but to really love me, if you will. Imagine the strength you'd have at that point in time. You'd have unbelievable resources at your fingertips. So let's talk about how to do that. Again, rapport is the ability to develop trust and understanding in a relationship. But how do you develop relationships in 30 seconds? Interesting. Very tough to do unless you have a clue on what we're talking about today. Now for me, it's simple. It wasn't always easy though. Heck, when I sold cars, I didn't know this material. I struggled in a lot of these areas. But the more I kind of investigated and learned this technology, the stronger I got at it, okay? Listen, communication is broken into 3 categories, okay? You've got A, your words, B, your tone, and C, your body language. Okay, so these 3 parts have their own percentages. We found that words only represented 7% of communication. 7. How can it be so low? I mean, we talk. I mean, that's how we communicate, right? Well, not according to these studies. You know, words are relative to the person doing the talking. Hey, I have a big house. Well, compared to who? I have a fast car. Well, compared to what? I want a safe automobile. Compared to what? You know, words are very ineffective unto themselves. So it's not what we say, but it's how we say it. It's understanding the language. We all speak, let's say in this case, English, but we all have different words for our relative to ourselves. Like, for example, an Eskimo, he's got over 100 different words just for snow. If you said snow to an Eskimo, he's thinking, well, what type of snow? Because there's so many different types of snow. Make sense? Kind of a corny example, but again, words are relative to the person doing the talking. The tone of voice is the pitch. It's the volume. It's the tempo that you deliver the word with. That's actually broken down to be 38% of communication. So it means a whole lot more. Now, when your mother as a kid growing up called your name, heck, you knew whether you were in trouble, right, or if it's okay, based on just how she called your name. Does that make sense? So realize that we want to mirror, if you will, these customers' tones. Not mimic these words or mimic their tones, but just model it, if you will. Become more like that. Okay? And then body is actually 55%. 55% isn't even spoken. It's eye contact. It's how close you stand to the customer, how far away you get, okay? It's how fast you blink, believe it or not. It's how you breathe. It's how you hold your head. All these things. If you're very animated, that means a whole lot more to the customer than just what you're saying or how you're saying it. So think of this. Who likes people who talk real loud? People who talk loud like people who talk loud. How do you feel if you don't talk loud and you talk to someone who's overbearingly loud towards you? You like stand off. You're like, man, leave me alone, aren't you? How about if you're not animated and the person you're dealing with is very animated and they're in your face and they're kind of going a million miles an hour? How do you feel? You're like, you back off again, right? So if I'm a customer and you're a salesperson and you're talking fast to me and you're very animated, I perceive that subconsciously as being pressured, right? And if I'm the customer and I'm real animated and talk really fast and you, the salesperson, are very laid back, let's say, and not animated at all, what happens there? I'll tell you what happens. The customer perceives you as not being interested in them. Can you see how that would work, everybody? Absolutely. So what we want to do is we don't want to give a choice to the customer. We are in the position of influence, okay? If you're out there buying something, hey, do what you want. But as a salesperson, we're in the position of influence. We can't not have rapport. So we've got to control ourselves in order to control the customer. Does that make sense? In order to do that, we've got to be very consciously aware of how we are acting or interacting with our customers, okay? So we've got to be aware of our words. We've got to be aware of our tones. We have to be aware of our physiology or our body language so we can mirror these customers. Now, without getting too deep, why does this work? We understand that people like themselves. We talked about that already. But why? I've always asked that question, why? If the answer wasn't right, I'd keep asking why. Why? I'll tell you what, let's just think about this here for a minute. If it's not my nature to talk fast, and they're talking fast, I have to change my nature. Because I can't afford to roll my dice and not have rapport with everyone I come in contact with. Now, again, we got 30 seconds, mind you, to develop this relationship. So we got to be on our game every single time. So if someone walks up to you fast, guess what? You can probably guess that they're probably more animated. To walk to them a little faster and meet them at their level. Is it making sense to everybody? And once we do that, we can be aware of these three areas of communication. Remember, seeking first to understand before trying to be understood, utilizing our pacing lead process as well. And if we can become more of a biofeedback to the customer, and biofeedback means this, whatever they're doing internally in their own mind, reflected back at them. What's going to happen? An internal rapport will happen. Because again, more similarities are being perceived than differences. Thus, a subconscious rapport takes place. Thus, my first impression of you is favorable. Thus, I answer your question. You open your mouth, you start pacing me a little bit. I feel even better about who you are. I begin to open up and tell you I'm looking for an SUV. I begin to trust you. I develop a relationship with you. And what happens? I buy from you. Now again, what percentage of people out there selling cars are aware of these things? And I'll tell you, less than 1%. Nobody is really focused in on these areas of our business. You know, we can memorize how to, memorize a few closing lines, but I'm telling you how to be, I'm teaching you how to fish. I can give you some, words to kind of hang on a line, and load your lips, if you will, but I want to teach you how to become a consummate professional. And it comes back to practice, drill, and rehearse, back to my coaching and mentoring and training and conditioning, these processes until they become second nature for you, okay? Everyone understand this process here now? Good. Okay, now we understand that communication is a whole lot more than just standing and talking. It's a whole lot more than that. But I also want you to understand how do you process information is different from person to person as well. Now, years ago they didn't know about this, but recently we realized that people process information visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically. We call it VAC as an acronym for that. Visual. People who are visual tend to be very animated in their body language. They talk really fast. For example, I'm a very visual person. I talk fast, I move fast, I'm very animated, and I use words to describe pictures. See what I mean? Imagine that. Hey, check this out. Look at this. Catch a glimpse of that. I'm using words to describe how I process information in my mind. Okay? So if I am a kinesthetic person who's very internal, okay, they need to feel good about certain things. They need to understand what's going on. You got to get comfortable with making a decision. Then you got your auditory personality. The auditory person uses words that describes their world, like, listen to me. Did you hear what I said? Does this make sense to you? These are words that kind of put you in a state of hearing. Okay? And how do they stand? Well, they stand with their head kind of cocked over a little bit because they're always trying to hear what's going on around them. That's how they process information. So let's just say going back to high school or grade school, for many, many years, guess what happened? The kinesthetic personality was classified more or less as a learning disabled person. Why? Well, because the visual, he saw the teacher. They did board work and so forth. That's how they learned. Easy for them. The teacher would talk about the assignments and describe what's going on in the chapter and so forth, and that made sense too. But the kinesthetic personality, what did they have to do? They had to get their hands on experience and work through the issues again and again and again. Now, once they have it down pat, they're the best at it. They're the best at it because it's like part of them. It's internal now. Now, take a look at here. If I'm visual, how do I communicate then to a kinesthetic personality? I better slow down. I better change my vocabulary. I have to be aware of these types of things if, in fact, I'm going to be successful at it. Now, if I don't change, what's going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Differences are perceived, less rapport is achieved. They're going to go down the road and shop for another car, and they're going to find someone that's who? Kinesthetic, and they're going to buy from that person. Now, again, if you can afford to roll a dice and have that happen, and the dealer allows you to do that, that's your call. But for me, man, I want to maximize every single opportunity. Knowledge is power when it's applied. Okay? Now, if you're unconsciously aware of these types of techniques, what do? You do your best what you've got. But I would tell you this here, this is where consulting really comes into play. This is how we get to sell cars to everyone we meet. So changing up, I have to change. I got to slow down. I got to talk slower. I got to move slower. I have to take longer pauses in my conversation with my customer if I expect to influence them in a positive way. Otherwise, they're going to perceive me as high pressure. They're not going to like that. How about the auditory personality? Again, same thing. Slow down. Use more words that represent them. Don't be nearly as animated. Change. Model them. Mirror them. So they perceive themselves in you. It's making sense. I'll give you, outside the car business, kind of a real-world example. Let's look at the word love. We can all relate to that word love. And let's just say, for example, we've all fallen in love before, let's just say, hopefully. Maybe not all of us, but some of us probably can say we have or are in love right now. When let's say, for example, I'm visual, and let's say my wife is kinesthetic. She is, by the way. Okay? If I'm visual and she's kinesthetic, that's a huge difference. Would you agree? Yeah, it is a huge difference. But you know what? When you're courting that person, what are you doing? You're selling that person on who? On yourself. Now that feeling you get when you're courting that person, you meet someone new, that new feeling, it feels so right. It couldn't be wrong. You got to be with them all the time. You got to call them all the time. You just feel so connected with that person. You know what I'm talking about, right? Absolutely. And then you court that spouse potentially until what happens? So let's say the goal is you want to get married. So you end up getting married, and after a few years of marriage, what do? You go back to doing what? Who you are. Now, you weren't even consciously aware that you were even doing this. Because when you're going through the court process, you're showing them through gifts, aren't you? You're telling them how much they mean to you. You're doing the cuddly, touchy-feely, all these things. You're putting them all into work. Okay? You're closing the deal, is what you're trying to do. After the deal's been closed, now you gravitate back to who you are. She gravitates back to who she is. And what happens? A few years into the marriage, you're like, I don't even know you anymore. My gosh. What happened? And she looks at you and says, I don't know you either. You were like this romantic da-da-da-la, and you this and that, and you were doing it all, but none of you were aware of what you were doing. It was just a natural, instinctual process. But all of a sudden, you're sitting there and you go, wow, what do we do now? You know, now you say, well, love. So how does a visual person express love? By touching and feeling? Cuddling? Going for long walks in the park? No, they don't. That's what that person wants to do. The visual person wants to give them a gift, take them on a trip, buy them something. Show me you love me. Show me. Right? This person doesn't want to be shown. They want to be felt and cuddled and caressed and all those things. Who's right, by the way? They're both right, aren't they? So what happens? Well, this person is doing everything he can, and that person is doing everything they can to have this relationship work. But the longer they try, the harder they try, the worse it gets. Because this person is doing everything he can, and he's not getting it back. He like goes home, and she's a clinging vine, and he's like, you know, give me some air, right? And she's like, you know, you don't love me. And he goes, what do you mean you don't love me? I bought you those earrings, and I took you on this trip, and I gave you that, and I bought you this. I mean, give me a break. Of course I love you. And she's like, well, I love you. And you know, he's like, well, no, you don't. All you want to do is like, you're a clinging vine towards me. I can't stand. I feel suffocated. Does this sound a little familiar to anybody here, maybe? Maybe a little bit. Even a little bit? Possibly? So my point is that who's right? They're all right. What do? Well, the key to this process is the following. You have to have, this is the keys, if you will, of success. You got to know, number one, is your outcome. Well, what do you want from the marriage? What do you want from this relationship? What do you want from the customer? Number two is, you got to use your sensory acuity. That's a strange word. Sensory acuity? What the heck does that mean? Well, sensory means what? Your senses, right? Your five senses. And acute means what? Sharp. We want to use our sharp senses. The third thing we want to do is become very flexible in our process. And then the fourth thing, actually, it's not really part of it, but really, you have to take action if you want anything to change. Would you agree? I mean, knowing is okay. The library is full of knowledge, but very few people take action on that knowledge. So, if you understand now that if I'm a visual and she's a kinesthetic, what do I have to do? Well, obviously, my outcome is to have a happy marriage, long term, for both me and my son. So what do you have to do? Well, use your sensory acuity. Not that I understand all this information, she's kinesthetic. Do I have to be flexible in my process? So guess what I do? Even though it's not part of who I really am, I have to slow down, talk slower, move slower, hold her. Instead of the traditional giving her a hug, 1001, 1002, you're done. You have to hold and give them a hug until what? Until they let go. Flexibility. And understanding that she understands who I am and she understands this as well, what happens? You're both making an effort. What happens? My point simply is what? How does this tie back to the car business? Simple. Your customer is kinesthetic. You're visual. How does a visual buy? How does a kinesthetic buy? The feel the wheel gets the deal for the kinesthetic. Would you agree? But for the visual, man, I got to see it. I got to see myself driving it. I see a lot of images of myself going on a vacation, you know, going to a party, having my friends compliment me on how great I look in this new car. The auditory needs to be told, man, you look unbelievable. You look marvelous, right? That's the analogy there we want to make with this whole process. So my point simply is this. Communication is a whole lot more than just go out there and give them a firm handshake and say, welcome to ABC Motors. How may I help you? Okay? A whole lot more than that. We have to be aware now of our words, our tone, and our body language. And we understand why we have to be aware. We have to be aware also of the visual, the auditory, and kinesthetic. So we can change up. And again, I'm not asking you all to master this here in the next 20 or 30 days, but review this again and again and again. And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes for you. And eventually, in about maybe a month or 2 months or even 3 months, guess what? You've mastered this process. And it's become to the point where you're unconsciously competent with it. You're not even thinking about it anymore. It's part of who you are. And trust me, when that happens, you'll make a ton of money, have a lot of great relationships with your people, your family, your friends, everybody. And people will perceive you as just a great salesperson, a good friend. Isn't that what we're trying to accomplish here? Isn't it? Let's review, okay? We understand now that pacing and leading really comes down to, remember our words, tone, and our body. Remember these three things? 7, 38, and 55% are the percentages in regards to these three areas. Now, pacing and leading comes into these categories right here. This is where our pace, lead fall into, right? But still, 55% of our communication is going to fall into what? Mirroring and matching our customers. Physiology and tones and all those types of things. We have to mirror those things to develop a really unconscious rapport with them all. And at that point in time, we apply our recipe for success, which is know our outcome for the day, for the week, for the month, for the year. And you know what an insane person does? An insane person does the same thing they've always done, expecting a different result to happen. It's like the old fly in the windowsill. You see a fly in the windowsill in the morning when you go to work, he's bouncing off the window, and you know what? You're in a hurry, so you run off to work, you get home, it's kind of cold out, you're ready to close the window, and there's a fly. He's laying down there at the bottom of the window. He's dead. Did the fly know what he wanted? He wanted out. Get me out of here. I'm out of this house. Did he use his sensory acuity? No. He did the same thing over and over and over, expecting something different to happen. How many of us do the same thing over and over and over, expecting something different to happen? Hey, 1 + 1 is 2. We can be here till now to the end of time. 1 + 1 is going to be 2. Until you change your formula, you're not going to get a different result. I made 50 grand last year. How do I make 60? Well, you don't do the same thing you did last year. Learn and grow and change. I'll tell you this, though. Communication is the key, the foundation to anyone that I know who's successful. I can't think of anybody who's reached any level of success, financially or other, who can't get their message across. A great CEO like, let's say, a Bill Gates, how does he build a company to being the richest man in the world? He can probably communicate pretty well. Would you agree? How about a Billy Graham? You know, everyone knows who he is, a preacher, right? Think he can get to be at the level he's at by being a poor communicator? And everybody, your dealer principal today, in your own store, do you think they got to that level by not being an effective communicator? Use these skills to better your hand, to grow your business, to reach the level that you need to be. Listen, one more thing I want to share with you, and we're just about done. Realize the following. In your life, we have our true potential. 100% of our true potential is right here. Down here is our zero potential. And somewhere on this graph is you, today. Okay? Where are we right now on this graph? Are we here? Are we here? Where are we? But most importantly is this. What are we doing to strive to get there? Are we working at enhancing ourselves? Hey, no offense, when's the last book you read cover to cover? Don't raise your hand, just think about it. Right? When's the last time we went to a seminar or really learned something proactively to grow ourselves internally? Again, the point I'm making is simply this. You're not going to ever reach your true potential unless you begin to really focus on being proactive in managing your time through the course of a day, a week, a month, a year. Does that make sense? Okay, guys, listen, we're giving you a lot of good information, and I want you to, again, repeat it over and over and over until this becomes part of who you are. Again, Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're not going to master these skills in a day. But through practice and repetition and role-playing together, you will get to the point where you'll master these skills. Listen, I appreciate your hard work, your energy, and your focus in this process. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.